Hello and welcome to Behind the Scenes. Today I am very, very, very excited to be chatting with Jenn Grace. Jenn is the founder of Publish Your Purpose Press. Jenn and I have had the good fortune of working together this summer on a few projects, which we'll talk about later. But Jenn, I'd love to have you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about Publish Your Purpose Press and who you work with and how that came to be.
Sure. Well, thank you, Nancy. I'm so happy to be here. I know it took some wrangling and some scheduling to actually get us in the same place at the same time. But as you said, I'm the founder of Publish Your Purpose Press. And so we serve authors that are looking to make a difference in the world. They're looking to make an impact. They're business owners, CEOs, entrepreneurial. So we're really kind of focused around how do we help people who have a really important message to share, and they're really just trying to amplify that message, and they're doing it through books. So it's really fun and exciting because I personally love all things business related. I feel like I'm a nerd in that regard. So every time we bring on a new author that is from a different type of industry or a different business, it's like my chance to kind of really understand their business model and then figure out how we're going to integrate their book into that business model so they can impact more people. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
I love that, and I appreciate it and really value with each book there come lessons, and the learning curve goes on, and I think also there, as much as you do have a process and a plan, there is no custom model. I think also is what I'm personally learning, but I would say it seems that way with you as well. So Jenn, we were speaking before we sort of went live, and I think in our working together and in watching you with your clients, can you talk a little bit about how, what a budding author, manuscript, whatever, they're coming to you, they need to publish a book. What's the backstory in terms of why they want to publish a book or the catalyst of the story they need to tell? Is it the same all the time, or what does that look like to you in terms of the variations?
Yeah, there's usually, at least from my vantage point, kind of two camps of people or two camps of authors. There's the author who has been a business owner for X period of time. They're out already doing some speaking potentially. They already have maybe a consulting business, some oftentimes service-based business. And so they've been out doing their work for as long as they can remember. And they constantly have people chiming in their ear of, you should write a book, you should write a book, or when are you going to write a book, or when is your book going to be available? And it's kind of that internal pressure of, I have more people I could be impacting and more people I could reach if I just spent the time to sit down and write this book. So there's kind of that author, which the majority of our authors do fit into, where they may not be writers, but they know that they have to write their book, as painful as that process might be. But they know that they need to do that to really up their game one more level by being able to impact a whole different kind of community of people versus those that may only be able to afford, whatever their services might be. So a book, being a $20 price point is a great way to reach a lot more people.
And before you talk about your second one, that person, you made the comment of that person might not be a writer. That doesn't mean, however, they have a very powerful, they do, though, have a very powerful message or amazing content or, kind of transformational information that needs to get out into the world, right? I mean, it's just because they're not a writer doesn't mean that there's not amazing content that needs to come out in that book that they're being urged to write.
Yeah, and they may not be a writer, but they might be a brilliant speaker, or they might be a brilliant guest on someone's podcast, or, being quoted in the media. So they do have tons of content, and they're already most often authorities in their space to some degree already, and that book is going to be the thing that just levels them up one more to get them the bigger ticket speaking opportunities, or to really get the different or more diverse consulting contracts, or whatever it might be. I think we've kind of seen over and over again that once you have a book, it really just takes your business to the next level, regardless of what your business is. Like if you're starting out and you're not making any money speaking, you can jump to maybe 2,500 in speaking. Or if you're already at 10,000 per engagement, you can bump that to 15 or 20 just by merely adding author next to your name. And it seems like it kind of seems easy in theory, but you and I both know the process to actually get the book done is far from.
We know that. Okay, so I interrupted you rudely. So what is your kind of second type of author that comes to you look like? What's that profile?
So the profile of that author is someone who maybe they're employed with someone right now, maybe they're working on some type of consulting contract that they're not super happy about, or they're just not, maybe they've lost their passion for whatever that thing is. Right. And they're writing a book in a completely different space to use that as a bridge to go from what they're not overly excited about doing to jump into that space of something they're super passionate and excited about. Because they know that if they have that book, once they get into that space, they can kind of fast track themselves versus kind of starting at the bottom with everybody else and slowly building up. They know that they can start off by being a published author on that topic and shoot up the, through the clutter a lot faster. So it's usually one or the other.
Can you give an example? I mean, the first one's clear. Can you give an example of what or even an author that you've actually worked with who has that profile? I just think that one's a little harder to see. Is it that they're following a passion that's been burning inside them? What does that look like?
Yeah, I can think of a handful of authors. So one of our authors does trainings for automotive companies. So she goes out and she speaks. She travels like 40 weeks out of the year. And she's out there constantly, and she does like the trainings on like the parts and all the things too, like the automotive, like the place that you go to actually buy your car. So she's doing the training for people who work at the dealerships.
Got it.
And so she's brilliant at it, and she loves cars and loves doing it, but it's not what she's like super passionate about. Okay. So she's passionate about a topic entirely different that's more around. I guess law of attraction would be like the best umbrella kind of statement to put that in. So she wrote a book that is in that space. And so we're strategically helping her reposition herself out of this corporate training type of space and more so into, being in more of like a healing type of space. Okay. Totally different. But she knows that by having that book and being able to share her story and really articulate her mission and vision really clearly for everyone, that it's going to be a lot easier for her to go up that ladder in that new vertical, if you will. Even though I still wouldn't say easy is a very relative term. It's nothing about any of this is easy, but it gives you an advantage.
And I think also easy, you see a path. There's as opposed to how do I get from here to there, that book becomes part of your path and journey to get to that next step. And Again, it doesn't make it easy, but I think it helps you see how you can get there easier than you might without, the opportunity of a book. I think we've kind of just like, how do they see the book working for their business? But once they come to you, they may have these two different mindsets or be at different places in their career. What does it look like? I'm going to fast forward over that, really easy part of writing the book and editing the book. And that point where, you and I, or we would sit there and say, oh, now it's time for marketing. And that obviously we know starts at the beginning. But what do those mindsets look like in terms of different opportunities for marketing the book? Like, again, we have some best practices and recommendations, but there's no one size fits all. And so what do you see being the kind of directions that those people go, or kind of here's the way we see it, sort of A, B, and C, small, medium, and large, in terms of how they approach their marketing of the book?
Oh, I feel like this is almost like a can of worms. So
I'll keep it contained. I'll keep it contained.
Let's reel the worms in. Okay, so if we're looking at just the word marketing in general, my background happens to be marketing. So I have a master's in marketing and undergrad in communications. So like I have eat, sleep, breathed marketing for my entire career, everything that I've touched. So to me, marketing is not a dirty word. However, there are a lot of people in this world who believe that marketing is a dirty word. And there are people who are actually in business. So sometimes it's hard to wrap your head around, especially from my standpoint where, marketing is just a very natural thing to do. I think because it doesn't have to be sleazy, it doesn't have to be salesy, just, really kind of authentic. And so I think a lot of people have this misconception around marketing just being like salesy and sleazy and gross, and they don't want anything to do with it. So with that umbrella or that, statement. We have some authors who are just natural born marketers where it just flows out of everything they say, everything they touch, and everything that they do is in alignment with who they are as a brand. So they don't have to do a lot from a marketing standpoint in terms of their mindset. You just tell them, we need to add your book to these 5 places on your website. We need to help you with a mailing list. You need, and just kind of go through that checklist. And to them, it's like, of course, like no brainer. Like I'll take what you're saying and I'm going to run with it. Right. And then there are people kind of on the complete opposite end of the spectrum who don't like the word marketing, and everything is a little bit harder to kind of push the needle forward because there's this mindset and this kind of ickiness that's wrapped around the word. Therefore, people are less, less inclined to want to really put themselves out there. And there's just a lot that kind of goes with that. And then there's a lot of people in the middle. I think most of our authors probably fall somewhere in the middle toward the range of just kind of taking direction and running with it. But it's definitely, it can be challenging because every strategy from a marketing standpoint has to be tweaked based on who you're working with. Like we have one author who does not like video at all. Like actually there's a couple of them. There's one in particular though. And everything that we did around kind of the launch of her book was we had to make sure that video was minimally involved. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you have to do what people are comfortable with, because if not, it's going to be a really tenuous process, and that's the last thing you want during your book launch.
Well, and I think the word marketing, it was interesting to observe some people are okay with the word, okay with the word marketing, but not with the word promoting, or vice versa. It really is a nuance on what they bring to that subject. And as well, I think you may find you've got speakers, you've got authors who have speaking platforms in the thousands, yet, encouraging them to grow an email list, which you and I would think are no-brainers, is sometimes tricky for them. They're kind of like, no, just let me keep speaking to thousands of people. I don't want to be bothered with all the, I don't want to be bothered with email lists. Or, clients who are extremely personable and, really, really where, they would be infectious in video. And as you said, like, it's just a little tricky for them. Or once you got them to not call it marketing, they were totally fine with that process. So I think it's fascinating to sort of see how, and I think also you've seen, I've certainly seen, if you try and get somebody to do something you can push them a little bit out of their comfort zone when you know it's right. But I think if you push too far, it becomes out of alignment and it doesn't feel authentic. And then it's not a successful marketing strategy is the other thing that I've learned. So there's a degree to which you push, but you then have to come back and say, if you're never on Facebook, we can't sit here and say to you, you need to be doing Facebook Live.
Absolutely. And I think that a lot of marketing companies and or marketing support from publishers, I think a lot of people really just kind of look at it as a very, like, you do this, then you do this, then you do this, without any variations off of that very rigid path. And I think that's why our authors as a collective really, like, if we look at the numbers, we know kind of from an industry statistic where this came from, I don't know, but that the average book sells 250 copies in its lifetime of its existence. Yes?
Say it again. I mean, that is a shock. That is a huge shock to anybody. They think book sales are in the thousands and thousands and thousands.
250 in a lifetime. That's traditional, that's self, that's us in the middle, that's just across the board. Our authors right now sell on average 410 copies per year. So we're already above the average, and that's an average. So we have some authors that are selling thousands a month, and we have other authors that aren't selling much at all, and that is kind of where the average comes from. But I think that that's why our authors do see more heightened marketing success, is because we are tailoring every single time we're working with somebody. We're taking the learned information from the previous round of authors that we've worked with, and we're really adapting and tailoring things as we go, because as you know, from someone who helps authors for a living, everyone has to be tweaked slightly so that way it is in alignment and authentic to who that author is.
And who their audience is and what there's sort of marketing 101, 3 principles as well, in terms of, they may be business books or self-help books or personal development books, but they still have audiences who are in different places and everything else. I want to get back to you, Jenn, because you were starting to tease out, and I think it's a great segue. And for me, in working alongside you this year, like learning the differences between traditional publishing and independent publishing, and there are big difference. I mean, there are big differences, and there are huge advantages to both. And I wouldn't even say they're huge disadvantages, but they're kind of you know, there's, again, it's not a one size fits all cookie cutter approach. And what I'm also learning is there's all sorts of things in between, from, you know, self is over here and traditional's over here. And you've created this wonderful world of, I think, being one of the best of both worlds. But what do you say to somebody who's coming to you and they're in that betwixt and between of, I don't know, I've been told I should do this, this, and this. What are some of the biggest things that you point out to people in terms of the advantages of independent publishing?
Yeah, I think that when I have those conversations, I will talk to any author, as long as it's around nonfiction or memoir, because that's my area of expertise. Fiction, I know nothing about.
Right.
I could take it, but that's not going to help anyone.
Right.
So what I usually lead with is, like, I will talk to anyone, whether they're going to be a right fit for us or not, and I will advise them of what direction they should go in. And oftentimes when I'm talking to people, they're kind of in this, they're coming to the table with an assumption that they can get a traditional book deal. And I think that is a false assumption to kind of come to the table with. And I'm not going to be rude or blunt about it, but I kind of help reframe that conversation to say, you know, there's a lot of work that goes into getting a traditional book deal. And it's a more work than I think it's ever been before. And on top of it, the advance on royalties that are paid is significantly less than it once was. So there's all of these kind of financial considerations, which is usually where I start the conversation, to say, you're going to pay roughly the same amount of money if you go traditional, self, or a hybrid independent publisher in the middle. It doesn't really matter. It's just a matter of how you're going to pay that money. And
that's probably a huge shock. I mean, that is probably a really big shock. But I think I can tell you, I'm working with publishers who are traditionally published. They, you know, it's not free to do it, even if you have marketing support, you know, from whoever your publishing team is.
Yeah, there's nothing free about any of the options. So the way that I kind of constructed the model that we work within is that I could see how much it costs if you want to self-publish it. And that's not really even considering all of the mistakes that people make in that process. So when someone self-publishes, you know, oftentimes I hear stories of, like, well, I hired the wrong cover designer, or I hired the wrong type of editor and then I had to have it re-edited. So they end up spending like $8,000 or $10,000 on editing alone because they've made colossal mistakes in the process. And they were going into it thinking that they didn't have to invest any money for editing. So it's kind of like all of these misconceptions of what we think about what it takes to publish a book, kind of all landing on someone's shoulders all at once, and it's super overwhelming. So I try to kind of lay the land of, like, okay, you're going to pay the same amount roughly, regardless of what direction you go in. For the long-term, like the longevity of your book, to really make the most money out of it, I think, obviously I'm partial and think going with a hybrid press makes the most sense, but also going self-publishing. Because what happens is that you're paying the money up front. So like with us, like an author is paying us up front for our expertise, our strategy, our guidance, our team and support. And then in the long term, I still have yet to find a better word for this, but I always say, like, we are beholden to the author because they are paying us. Therefore, we 100% have their best interest at heart. We are looking at how the book is going to support them, how it's going to support their business. And if you're going a self-publishing path, you don't have that support. And if you're going traditional, 9 out of 10 times, they don't really care what your business is or if the book is actually supporting your business. They're trying to move copies of your book. So It becomes a lot more of a balancing act and more of a struggle in the long term if you're kind of trapped in this situation where you have people who may or may not be supporting you, but those that are, even if it's minimal, their views aren't in alignment with what your goals are as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, as an author. So we kind of created this model in the middle, which there's plenty of other companies like ours out there. We just really focus on kind of the business aspect of things and the marketing strategy, because I don't want people to get screwed over.
No, and I think I love your candidness. I love that you put numbers on it, and I've loved watching you gently hold authors' hands through the whole process, but also managing expectations and kind of laying the playing field for what this looks like. And I think that doesn't necessarily always happen in traditional publishing. I think any person who's been traditionally published, once they've been through it, they're like, oh, now I get it. Now I know what's going on. And then they may have much more information to make that story. I think, Jen, the other thing that was one of my, sort of ahas or learning is, even that the marketing promotion strategy with traditional publishers, it really is that build up to launch and pre-order and buzz and launch day and pub week and the few weeks after that. I think we're seeing that shift, but that really has historically or traditionally been the focus for traditional publishers. And kind of building your strategy that way. And you don't want to say that, then you're done, but I think but with publishing, the more independent publishers, you are thinking much longer term. I mean, and yes, launch day is important, but it isn't the end all be all, as much as you now have this book, which is in itself a marketing tool. And it's been fascinating watching the differences in the approach of those and what's the best of both worlds there.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to thinking of starting in the beginning of the process and thinking toward the future in the long term. Because like you're saying, the book launch in our world it's not the finale in any way. It's just the beginning. Like, it is now birthed, it is in the world, it is now available for people to purchase, but it's how do we extend beyond that? And before we started recording, we were talking about kind of B2B versus B2C. So if we look at, and I don't want to say this is specific to traditional, but I think it's a mindset of the book is launched, and when the book is launching, you're focused on consumers, you're focused on readers, you're focusing on that one-to-one transaction. I, as the author, to you as the potential reader. So that's kind of where the launch is. It's like, how do we round up the troops of a lot of people to then hit bestseller lists, etc. However, if we're looking at business owners and people who have speaking platforms already, regardless of their size, the real money and the real impact to be made for an author is going down the B2B route, which is looking, and we look at our authors' calendars from the time we start the process to say, let's look out 8, 10, 12 months. What speaking engagements do you already have on the calendar? What ones are you in conversation with? Whether they're free or paid is irrelevant. We're looking at how do we make sure that that author is showing up to that event, whether they're selling books from the back of the room or whether they were able to negotiate those books as part of their speaker fee. That's really where the money is being made, because it's not me selling to you, it's me selling to you as a conference organizer who's now buying 500 books from me.
Right.
And the challenge with that is that those sales do not count toward any bestseller list, which is why I think in traditional publishing, it's more about the launch and getting to that, bestseller status, whereas a long-term, real opportunity to use a book within someone's business is well beyond the launch phase. It's really focused on selling 400, 500, 600 books in any given month because they're out, speaking to different audiences that have the means to buy that many books. That's where I think the real money is at.
And it's been, that's a fascinating way of thinking about it. And I think it's not somebody, and we've had those questions. How do I get on the bestseller list? How do I get on Amazon's #1 that day? How do I do that? And I think you're so wise to come back and say, wait a second. I understand probably why you want that, but let's talk about what that means versus other ways of thinking about this and, but staying focused, because as we know, every client wants to sell 1 million copies and be on all the bestseller lists and get everything. So I love how thoughtful you are about defining sort of, okay, let's be clear on what those goals are and what that means to you in the long term.
say that they can't get on the bestseller list. That's a whole other part of it too, because I would say, and I don't have the exact number, but I would say at minimum 85% of our authors do hit Amazon bestselling list in multiple categories. Nice. So we're still able to get that kind of ego boost to some degree, or that additional kind of credibility to say Amazon bestselling book, but it's still looking long-term. So they're not necessarily mutually exclusive strategies, but rather it's like, let's launch the book, let's do our thing, but we're also selling all of these hundreds of books in any given month on a different path, but they kind of still merge together, if you will.
Yeah. Jenn, before we conclude, we're kind of at the year end. I don't know where you are with your planning or your clients, but whatever. I'm just curious, and this is marketers talking to what do you see happening from what you, let's say, learned in 2018 versus where we are right now and looking toward next year? What do you see either yourself doing differently, or you advising your authors to do differently, or think about that, is something new? And this isn't a trend, but I think, as you said, you're always in that kind of constantly iteration process. What do you see on the horizon of the next thing you either want to test, try, advise, or something like that?
This is such a good question. I feel like all of 2018 was kind of a year of testing and just kind of seeing what works, what doesn't work, what can we modify differently, how can we support our authors better. And I think for me personally, and I'm even debating whether or not I should declare this to the universe, but I'm going to say it anyway,
I'm putting you on the spot, so.
You're hearing it here first, folks. So one of the things that I see our authors consistently struggle with over and over again is the speaking side of things. So one of the things that I will be testing, in what I'm not entirely sure what form or fashion this will look, but how do we add additional support services for all of our authors? This wouldn't be for the general public or anything, but really just people that we've published, because we are so intimately knowledgeable about their topic, about who they are as people, about who their target readers are, that we're in a very unique position where we can help them get additional exposure. And I have yet to find a product or a service that exists to date that really knows how to do this. And I don't know what it looks like, but trying to find new ways to support our authors from the speaking side of things. And I don't know what that looks like, but that's something that's going to be a big focus in 2019.
I love that. We've seen it as well. I think the traditional speaker bureau is, I don't think it's dead, but it's in need of overhaul. And I think, just in putting strategies together for authors, that has to be, that's certainly a part of it. I think I would layer onto that, what I'm saying, having come from my background in PR, is that traditional, you and I came to be kind of more from the digital marketing perspective, but what I think I'm really seeing in addition to the speaking part is traditional or old school PR and a press strategy is still important. It doesn't necessarily move, again, the books in the same degree you were talking about the B2B, but I think we're really seeing the pendulum swing from, you cannot put all your eggs into the digital marketing basket. That's a part of it, and it's not a part to be ignored, but there are these other very key pieces that involve a lot of, I can't say work, but they do involve a lot of contacts, connections, pitching, good old-fashioned networking that I think are sometimes a shock to people, especially, authors and writers who tend to be a little more introverted than extroverted, right? They didn't know that this was going to be part of the plan. They thought, oh, write the book, here we go. There's this whole outreach piece, be it speaking, be it press, that it makes the journey more successful if they're including that in there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that you do really, really well with the authors that you work with, is really kind of that, getting them that additional exposure going forward. With, of course, a lot of it, a heavy digital focus, but, we have to be, once the book is published, that's not the end at all. Like, it's really like you've just begun, and there's a long shelf life for a really well done book. So I think that, that makes perfect sense.
Well, Jenn, as always, I do love chatting with you. This to me has been a great, for people who aren't familiar with, let's say, the independent publishing, how could people find you or follow you or contact you to kind of continue this conversation or ask you more questions and learn more about Publish Your Purpose Press?
Yeah, absolutely. So if someone is watching, whether, it's live or, 2 years from now, you can go to meetwithpyp.com, and that will give you access to my calendar personally. And I will happily chat with you if you have a nonfiction or a memoir book, happily kind of discuss the pros and cons. Also, you can go to our website, which is publishyourpurposepress.com, and all of our contact information is there, and just kind of how we operate and who we work with is all available. One thing I will note is that our Authors Academy, we have many sessions that are starting in January, which is kind of the whole process from start to finish of what it takes to either self-publish a book, traditionally publish, or work with someone like us. But it really kind of gives the whole landscape of what the publishing industry looks like. And we have the next one starting in the end of January. So if anyone's interested in that, that information is on our website too.
Perfect. Well, we can also put it in the show notes as well, because I'm a big fan of the Authors Academy. And I think for somebody who's, let's say, not ready to completely dive all the way in, but wants to start getting their feet wet, it's a great program to be able to do that and get a taste and exposure to Jenn and her amazing team. So we'll put that in the show notes. Thank you, Jenn. I love it. I love chatting. And we will see you soon. We'll put any other comments and links in the bottom. Thanks again, Jenn, for your time, and happy holidays.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Nancy.
Take care. And we're going to see if I can